Yes, indeed, it is Download This Show, and it is a very big welcome to she who hosteth last week, Ariel Bogle, technology and science writer extraordinaire for the ABC. Welcome back.
Thanks, Marc.
You did great.
Thank you so much.
It was really fun to listen to, and I'm 100% taking more time off.
Good to be back on this side of the desk.
Thank you for being back here. Alongside Ariel Bogle, we have a man whose work you can read in the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age, Crikey, sometimes just on Twitter. Occasionally you can read the captions on his Instagram. They're also very witty. Ben Grubb, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
So, presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren is amongst a few people that have called for, I guess, the dismantling or the disaggregation of some of the biggest tech companies in the world. What's interesting, though, is she's not alone, and it sort of broaches this interesting idea of, actually, if you were to pull apart Facebook or Google, what would that actually look like? And how would you do it? And is it even doable? So, let's just start with the news and exactly what's happened. Ariel, what has been called for?
So, yes, Elizabeth Warren, who is a Democratic candidate for president, has always been a critic of big tech. I guess big tech being Facebook, Amazon, Apple, probably throw Google in there as well, obviously. And she came up with a proposal this week, which obviously got a lot of attention because it was maybe the biggest proposal yet to offer specific recommendations for what should be done to address the power of big tech. And she advised two particular ways of doing this. The first one, as you mentioned, is to undo some of those big mergers that have allowed these companies to grow so large. So Facebook, for example, acquired WhatsApp, the incredibly popular messaging platform. It acquired Instagram. Amazon in the United States bought Whole Foods, a really popular supermarket chain over there. Google bought Waze. They've all made countless acquisitions to shore up, of course, their technical back end and their offering, but also to dominate the markets in which they're involved. And she proposes winding back some of those mergers. How that would work? That's unclear.
I love the patented Ariel.
I mean, it's a spicy idea, and I think it's one that will provoke a lot of interesting discussion, and that's no bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the curious things, particularly and obviously this isn't a politics podcast, but one of the interesting things is in the past, Democratic candidates have always done reasonably well generating money, which is, of course, an essential part of the US political process. They've done reasonably well out of generating money out of Silicon Valley. One imagines, Ben Grubb, that Elizabeth Warren either doesn't believe she needs or is happy to fly in the face of said money.
Yeah, no, exactly. As for the actual idea of doing this, I'm not sure whether it's the right approach. I mean, it's very unlikely that they would succeed in doing it, and there'd be court challenges, and it would go on for many years, and it'd just be very messy.
Is this Elizabeth Warren's southern border wall? Is this what the equivalent is for her?
Well, to be fair, in the United States, in the past, I mean, maybe a century ago, America did have a much stronger hand on antitrust law. And they did break up conglomerates like this and made big companies in the railways and other, dominant industries of those days break up. So it's not unprecedented. It's just something that's really gone out of fashion in countries like Australia and countries like America to take these big actions on competition.
Yeah. I think that you look to Australia and where we have an ACCC, the regulator of, competition, and it has been allowing the mergers of internet providers. I think TPG has become pretty much one of the bigger competitors to Telstra, and you look back a few years and it wasn't like that. So they've bought up iiNet, a bunch of the smaller ISPs. There used to be something like 700 internet providers in Australia, and now as you've got the NBN coming into play, and that caused a lot of this because it costs these providers a lot of money in terms of buying capacity at the back end to get access to all of Australia. But you've seen a friendly ACCC that has allowed these big mergers, and it's starting to question or query some of them in the lead up to potentially Vodafone and TPG, I think, looking to try to merge. So it's good to see that they're actually, looking at what are the negative impacts on consumers here. As for what I think Warren's comments are around breaking it up, I think that we should be looking at these providers as a utility. I guess that's the core point here, is that whenever it's like telecommunications or electricity or water, we see these things as things that are vital to, being a human. And those are industries in which I think should be regulated more than any other industry. And if monopolies do form, then, they should be regulated more, not necessarily broken up. I mean, we should have prevented them being formed at the start if we wanted them to be broken up. So now I think we have to retrospectively look back and have more regulation around what are they allowed to do and what are they not.
I mean, Facebook is not a utility, right? As much as I feel like I need it in the morning, I don't think it's a utility though. So, no, okay, feel free to disagree.
Yeah, no, I went off Facebook and Instagram for a week, and a whole bunch of people. Firstly, what happens is a whole bunch of people think that you've blocked them, and it's very frustrating just explaining to them, and then they block you back, and it's like,
wow,
drama.
Yeah, so much drama.
So more drama in this 30 seconds than there has been in a whole season of Riverdale. Well done, Ben Grubb.
That's untrue, Marc.
I know. Also, I'm too old to watch Riverdale. I just went for the youngest reference I could think of.
But what happens is that you, if you're not accessible via some of these platforms, you won't get invited to certain events, or people will start to forget about you. So I do think that Facebook has become a utility style service. You don't get invited. You can't be in group chats with your friends. It's much like iMessage is almost like a monopoly. Like unless you have an iPhone, you can't be in the iChat. The iMessage chat groups.
You just get WhatsApp, right? That's fine.
Yeah, well, if you can convince all your friends to do that. But they do certainly have monopolies in areas, and they are kind of becoming utility-like, I think. But you can live without them. You can try to live your life without them, but it will be less, you won't have the best life that you could have if you don't have Facebook to be able to talk to your friends. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Elizabeth Warren actually has another proposal which directly deals with this idea of the utility. She wants some of these online platforms to be declared a public utility of sorts. And what that really means in practice is that she wants to prohibit a company that offers a marketplace of some description. Say Amazon offers a giant marketplace selling books, anything you can want in the world. She wants to prohibit companies like Amazon being able to offer the marketplace and participate in it at the same time. So someone like Amazon creates a whole range of products which they sell on their own platform, and through all the other sellers that they don't own, they gain a remarkable amount of insight into consumers, into what they want, into what the right price point is, and they have been able to push competitors in their own marketplace out of the market with their own products through the insights that they gain from operating and owning the marketplace in the first place. So it's kind of a closed ecosystem, and that's something she also wants addressed.
That's that idea of vertical integration, which is why you see Amazon buying up things like Whole Foods and other organizations.
Yeah.
I think in order to kind of navigate this particular topic, I think it's worth reorientating it for a second and look at why some of these companies consolidated in the first place and what's driving that. I think the commonly understood reason why Facebook buys something like Instagram is the sense that Facebook is probably peaked in terms of its sort of cultural currency, and it's on a very gradual but still quite lucrative decline, while Instagram is, certainly if you talk to certain demographics, Instagram holds the sort of the cultural cachet. But is there also a financial element to it as well, where some of these what were smaller companies actually need the backing of bigger organisations to kind of support them, to bolster them? Is there a need for smaller companies to be acquired that we're seeing?
Well, I think that Instagram could have gone it alone for some while. Like, it didn't need any cash. I mean, the founders probably wanted to have a nice exit. And I think it was only sold for like $1 billion. It would be worth a lot more now, of course. But it's a good point you raise. I think that the ecosystem obviously needs acquisitions, and then what happens after those acquisitions is the startup founders usually invest in new companies, and that creates even more. I mean, after MySpace shut down, there are a whole slew of startups that were created after it, and the same happens when you have big exits like Atlassian in Australia. So it does create more opportunities, new jobs, etc. But it doesn't necessarily need to happen. Why they're doing it is usually around engagement time. I think that Facebook saw that Instagram was just stealing a whole bunch of its users' time. So everyone was spending hours on Instagram each day, more than they were on Facebook, and it just wanted to consolidate that and have it for itself.
Although I will say you really notice it when this week Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp were all down at the same time, and you really felt like, the fact that these are all run by the same company really hobbles all of my communication.
Coming back to
I needed to start communicating with people on Slack, and no one should ever have to communicate on Slack if you don't need to.
Well, maybe on this point, maybe Snapchat's the company to look at, because Snapchat still growing in popularity. A few years ago, it was getting all the attention. It was a social media platform that teenagers loved. Facebook wanted to acquire it. The founders of Snapchat, now Snap, said no. If Facebook didn't own Instagram and WhatsApp and all the platforms that it does, could a company like Snap take on Facebook over the years? That's an open question, but because Facebook is just so big now, how could a company like Snap make its own acquisitions to ever counter that weight from Facebook?
Well, Snap's a really interesting example because, I mean, you just see the heft of Facebook and Instagram sort of lift the
features.
Yeah, I mean, literally lift. I mean, I'm not going to say steal for fear of getting sued, but, you know, they've lifted 2 or 3 really key functions, adopted it into a already very popular product in the form of Instagram. And Snap, well, between that and Kylie Jenner pronouncing it dead on the internet, it's hard to see what the future is for a company like Snap. Just in terms of practicality, the 2 proposals that Elizabeth Warren has chucked up into the air, are they actually viable? Like, let's say hypothetically she does become president and she does have a Congress on her side, which she would do for a couple of years. Is there the appetite and would it actually work for the benefit of consumers?
This is an interesting part of all this because, just to get a bit nerdy about competition for a second, at the moment in the United States, particularly, forgetting Australia, competition law is really focused around the well-being of consumers. So it's hard to say on that test that Facebook is bad for consumers, that Amazon is bad for consumers, because Facebook is free, obviously, and Amazon, because of its market heft, pushes prices down.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, with endless benefits for consumers, and that's reflected in their immense popularity. But a lot of antitrust academics and this new wave that Elizabeth Warren is a part of is saying that this isn't the only lens. The benefit to consumer is not the only lens that you need to look through. You also need to look at the power of these companies, their structural power to push out competitors, to have immense political power. You know, you might say that Amazon and Facebook in their entirety are taking on political power commensurate to a country, you know, and these also need to be part of that picture, because we don't know in the long run that Amazon will always act in the best wishes of consumers. Once they've sewn up an entire market, they'll be free to push prices up to wherever they like, and there'll be no other option for consumers because they'll have either acquired or pushed out competitors from their marketplaces. So benefit to consumer in the form of free or low price is not the only test. And I think consumers don't always know what's in their best interest, right? Like, this is something that regulators are meant to think a bit bigger picture on. So I don't think it's impossible what Elizabeth Warren proposes. It'd be difficult and it would be very controversial, but I think it's a good thing that Elizabeth Warren and this new cohort are taking a closer look at what the reality is of these companies and how they work.
Download this show is what you are listening to. It is your guide to the week in media, technology and culture. Marc FENNELL is my name. In studio are people that are smarter than me, thank God. Ben Grubb, technology writer, and Ariel Bogle, technology writer. And most of us in this room grew up without social media as children. But that's not the case for kids growing up now. There's pretty detailed digital footprints of kids growing up now. But what if there was a button? What if there was a button you could hit that when they turned 18, they or you could just click and all of their digital history disappears and they could start from scratch as an adult and build their own digital footprint? Well, that doesn't exist. But there are proposals, particularly in the United States, to do something similar, or at least some of those things. Ariel, eraser button, real, not real? What's the news?
I wouldn't mind it.
Yeah, it'd be great.
I would really like that.
I would feel slightly less guilty about posting so many pictures of my kids on the internet.
Yeah, it's an interesting moment when a lot of the kids who grew up while their parents were putting their photos on social media, are now coming of age and discovering this digital footprint that they had no hand in creating. So I think a button was no bad thing. I mean, how it would work in practice is another question, but I do think it's worth starting to examine letting kids start fresh, I suppose, with their digital footprint and making sure that mistakes they made in their youth or embarrassing photos from their parents or oversharing from mummy bloggers doesn't haunt them for
or
life.
daddy bloggers.
Or
No,
daddy
not really,
bloggers,
no.
sorry, of course.
So this all falls under a piece of legislation, Ben, in the United States called COPPA, which is Children Online Privacy Protection Act. So what is it? What's been chucked up under debate?
Yeah, so two senators have proposed a major update to one of the federal privacy laws in the US. And if approved, it would allow for a set of parental controls that would not only do what you said, but enable a ban on targeted advertising to young minors, which is kind of already there, but they want to codify it as part of, the whole of the US and a number of companies having to implement that. As for the practicality, I mean, it's totally possible. I mean, if you look to Europe, which seems to be setting all of the rules around privacy online, then you will see that already you have this ability to delete you can just ask a technology company, hey, you need to delete.
And not just for kids.
Yeah, and why is this just for kids, by the way? I want to be able to erase everything online. And, already you see if you go to Facebook now, you can click a delete button. And not only that, you can export what they have on you so that you've got it on file. You've got all the photos.
You've done this, right? You've exported all this stuff. How usable is that information? Is it just like a page of binary? Because that's what because I imagine they export you out information in the most useless fashion
There's
possible.
a lot of folders and weird files.
Yeah,
there are a lot of folders, but and a lot of weird files, but you do get the exported like JPG, the JPEG files. Everything is there. It does get a little bit more complicated going through the posts of what you've previously written. But if you're deactivating in the first place, I assume it's because you didn't want all that stuff to be out there. But now, you can do it. You can download it all. It works. It's good that they're looking at this, and it's good that we can also, I guess, protect our kids from, advertising online and have adults in control of that until a certain age. I think they're looking to also expand the protection not only from 13 but to 15. It'll be up to the politicians as to what they do here, but I think the idea is a good one, and I want it myself as well.
One of the things that I didn't realise is that this legislation in the US does already exist, and there's actually already been some sort of charges laid over it. The Federal Trade Commission penalised the social media, the so-called upbeat positive social media service TikTok. They gave them a fine of $5.7 million US for violating the current regulations. And basically, what they were doing was they were collecting personal data on kids under 13 without receiving explicit consent from parents. So already some of this stuff is being, I guess, litigated, Ariel.
Yeah, that's right. And TikTok's a particularly interesting example because their own terms and conditions say that kids under 13 shouldn't use it at all. Maybe they put that in their T's and C's to comply with this COPPA law from the United States. But I've been on this app and I wrote a couple of stories about it, and it is so easy to find kids younger than 13. I actually spoke to one kid and her mum who was under 13, and her mum was aware but happy for her to use it with certain sort of privacy safeguards in place.
Also because TikTok is sold as like the positive, upbeat, like the anti-Twitter.
Yeah, and it's a place where, with kids do these lip syncing routines, they do skits, they do pranks and stuff like that. It's very much a kid-focused platform, and I think it's no wonder that they sort of attracted the attention of US regulators over this because their platform is so explicitly aimed at kids, and they were doing very little, allegedly, to figure out when kids were under 13 and when they weren't. But I think it is interesting, this law too, that it wants to extend those protections to 15, but allow kids between 13 and 15 to potentially consent to having data collected. There's a lot of interesting debate happening around the world about kids and data protection. When are kids able to actively understand and consent to data collection and understand the implications of that data collection? I don't think anyone actually really has the perfect model. And in the meantime, kids are getting inundated with targeting from game developers, from social media apps. If we truly understood the picture of what's being collected about kids, we'd be truly horrified.
All right, there is lots more of this in the podcast. So download this show. It is available right now wherever you get podcasts. See you guys.